He came limping out of the rain like a ghost. Mud-caked fur clung to his frame, blood traced the cracks of his torn paws, and his eyes, steady, unblinking, carried something deeper than pain. No collar, no leash, no sign of where he came from. Just a slow, silent march down a soaked highway in North Carolina. He didn't bark. He didn't beg. He didn't stop. Cars passed. Some slowed, some didn't. A few people tossed scraps of food or tried to call out. But the dog, a German shepherd, barely more than skin and bone, ignored them all. He kept moving, head low, bleeding onto the broken asphalt, as if some invisible thread was pulling him forward. It was purpose, not panic. He crossed rivers swollen with rain, veered through forests thick with bramble, navigated county lines like he had a map only he could. See? His steps faltered but never ceased. The pain? He walked through it. The hunger? He wore it like a second skin. What he was chasing was bigger than survival. It was memory. He had only one destination: to find the man who had once, just once, saved his life. This isn't a story about a dog lost. This is a story about a dog returning. And the way he moved, like every step cost him something, like he had nothing left to spare, made people stop and ask, what drives an animal to endure this kind of agony? To walk over 300 miles, injured, and alone through storm and shadow? One woman would ask that question more than anyone. Her name was Erica. She heard about the dog through the shelter radio. Just another stray, they said. Another case of neglect, maybe abuse. But something in the dispatcher's voice made her pause. There was urgency there, a weight. She dropped her paperwork, grabbed her keys, and drove into the storm. The roads were slick, the sky torn open with lightning, and yet she felt pulled, not just by duty, but by something older, something deeper. And when she found the dog limping along a ditch just past the Blue Ridge Parkway, she felt it in her chest. This wasn't just a rescue. This was a witness. From that moment, Erica didn't try to capture him. She didn't try to fix him. She simply followed, from a distance, 50 feet, sometimes more, never close enough to frighten him, always far enough to watch. And what she saw was more than an animal in pain. It was a creature, possessed by hope. Night fell. The rain thinned. He curled beneath a bush, nose still pointed north. Erica waited nearby, sleepless, heart pounding. By morning he was gone, but the story had begun. Tap like if you believe animals remember kindness. Comment where you're watching from, because what happens next will make you question everything you thought you knew about loyalty, survival, and love. Started with a voicemail. You're not going to believe this one, the voice said. It's another stray, but it's different. Doesn't beg, doesn't bark. Just walks, like it's going somewhere. Erica replayed it twice before she grabbed her coat. She had spent 8 years working as a veterinary technician, 4 of them with the county rescue unit. She had seen her fair share of strays, feral, abandoned, broken. But something in her colleague's voice stirred a familiar itch, curiosity wrapped in concern. She found him on the edge of Route 17. A German shepherd, lean, ragged, moving like a shadow along the guardrail. His coat was a patchwork of dirt and old scars, his gait uneven, but his eyes, sharp, scanning, locked forward. He didn't flinch at the sound of cars, didn't react to the honk of a truck. He just kept walking. Erica parked a quarter-mile up the road and waited. When he passed her car, she saw the old fabric tied around his neck, a makeshift collar, frayed, stained, possibly military issue. She stepped out slowly, a leash and biscuit in hand. He didn't even glance her way. "Hey, buddy," she whispered. Nothing. He passed her without pause, his stride steady, measured, as if her presence was just another tree in the forest. That was the first day. The second day, she followed him. He crossed the highway, ducked under a chain-link fence, and disappeared into the tree line of Red Hollow Forest. She kept her distance, Tried calling out once, softly. He paused only for a second, then kept moving. She started a journal. 7:15 a.m. Begins northbound movement from gas station ruins 8:23 a.m. Crosses stream. No hesitation. 10:04. Fuel ignores food left under tree. 1:11 p.m. Stops briefly at burned-out cabin. Sniffs ground. Stares for 7 minutes. He didn't act lost. He wasn't scavenging, wasn't looking for people or shelter. He was following something only he could sense. According to a study by the Canine Cognition Center at Yale, dogs possess an internal mapping ability comparable to birds and sea turtles, allowing them to remember geographic locations over long distances. Some have been recorded traveling up to 200 miles in search of former owners or places of trauma. This dog, Erica began calling him the Traveler, fit that pattern too perfectly to be coincidence. She tried again on day 3, left a trail of broth, kibble, even bacon. He smelled them, then walked away. It rained the 4th day. She thought he might stop. He didn't. He crossed a bridge slick with moss, climbed an embankment, limped past a broken barn door, and pressed on. By day 5, Erica had changed. She no longer thought of capturing him. She just wanted to understand. She drove ahead to a ridge where the trees opened up, got out with binoculars, and watched. He reached the clearing below just as the sun split the clouds, and for a moment, he stopped. Not from exhaustion, not from pain, but as if something ahead had shifted. He looked up, and then he ran. Erica stayed on his trail for nearly 2 weeks. She used a GPS collar she eventually placed on a piece of meat, left overnight on a log. In the morning, the meat was gone, so was the collar. But later that day, it pinged. He had taken it, whether by accident or choice, she didn't know. But now she had a way to follow. Over the next few days, she tracked him through old rail trails, logging roads, and once, through a shallow river he crossed at dawn. At no point did he slow. He rested only in brief intervals under a rusted bus beside an overturned canoe in the shadow of a church that had lost its steeple. There was a path in his mind, and he was following it like a thread through a maze. Only he could see. One evening, as Erica huddled in her truck watching the rain wash the windshield, she whispered to herself, "You're not just running, are you?" She knew it then. He wasn't escaping something. He was returning to someone. The first time Erica saw him, she didn't think he was extraordinary. He looked like so many strays she had seen before in her work as a veterinary technician. Coat matted with dirt, ribs just barely visible beneath thick fur, a cautious gait shaped by fatigue and wariness. But what struck her was the way he moved. Not aimlessly, not like a dog lost, but like a traveler with somewhere to be. He was always headed north. Each morning she found his paw prints pointing the same way. It was as if a compass had been etched into his bones, drawing him forward through rain and wind, hills and creeks. She started following him from a distance, observing without interfering. A part of her wanted to help, but something told her he wouldn't accept it. On the 4th day, she noticed the strip of cloth tied loosely around his neck. It was old and stained, knotted as if it had been torn off in a hurry and repurposed. Erica leaned on her binoculars to get a better look. The fabric was green, military issue, with faded ink barely visible. One corner held what looked like the beginning of a name. J. Marr. A puzzle piece half buried in dirt. Back at her office that night, she dug through old intake records from nearby shelters. It took hours, but she found it. A male German shepherd, brought in 7 months ago. Estimated age, 4. No microchip. Description: underweight, shy, aggressive with men. Medical notes mentioned a scar on the right foreleg and defensive responses to loud sounds. Intake status: unadopted. Exit status: missing. That word stuck with her. Animals didn't just disappear from shelters. She reached out to the woman who had logged the intake, an overworked shelter manager named Myra. Myra remembered the dog. That one was different, she said. Didn't bark, didn't eat, just waited, and one day, gone. Cage locked, but he was gone. By the end of the week, Erica had a journal full of notes. Day 2 circled an empty fire pit, sniffed wood, lay beside it for 30 mins. Day 3, startled by helicopter overhead, dropped to ground instantly. Day 5, refused food left at trailhead, continued. Walking. Day 7, spent over an hour by a rusted mile marker, eyes fixed ahead. Day 8, ignored calls and clapping sounds. No response to typical attention cues. This wasn't random behavior. This was recollection. The cloth around his neck intrigued her. She carefully took a photograph through her zoom lens and ran it through a military surplus database. The results were inconclusive, but similar patterns appeared on standard-issue uniforms used in Afghanistan a decade ago. Something else stood out. His reactions were consistent with PTSD markers in canines, startle reflexes, hypervigilance, avoidance of enclosed spaces. According to a study by the U.S. Army Veterinary Corps, up to 5% of working dogs exhibit signs of post-traumatic stress after combat deployment. Symptoms can persist for years, particularly if the dog is separated from its handler. It all began to fit together. She traced his path to an old road, gravel, broken in places, barely visible on satellite images. Locals called it Pine Hook Trail, but it didn't appear on any official maps. It led through thickets, crossed creeks, curved around an old ranger station, and eventually faded into woods. It was here, on the edge of this forgotten path, that he stopped. He stood at the fork for over an hour, unmoving. The forest around him swayed with wind and bird call, but he remained still. Erica watched from a distance, heart in her throat. When he finally moved, it was deliberate. He turned left, toward a cabin barely visible beyond the trees. She didn't follow right away. Instead, she marked the location and returned that evening to investigate. The place looked abandoned. Wooden steps half-rotted, windows shuttered. But at the foot of the porch she saw them, paw prints, deep, fresh. Inside she found remnants, a rusted dog bowl, a canteen with the initials J.M., and a torn tarp with dried blood. This wasn't coincidence. This was history. Back home, she made one more call, this time to a contact at the VA. She asked about any soldiers named J. Marr, who had served with canine units overseas. The man on the line hesitated, then said he'd look into it. That night, Erica dreamed of the dog. Only this time, she wasn't following him. He was leading her. In the days that followed, Erica reviewed video footage she had collected. Each frame told a deeper story, the way his ears twitched at the snap of a twig, how he froze at the distant echo of fireworks. She slowed the clips down, noting every micro-movement, his posture, his breathing, the way his eyes darted to treetops, almost expecting something to fall. According to the ASPCA, nearly 60% of animals rescued from trauma environments display behavior consistent with learned survival response. In dogs, especially those trained under harsh regimens, such responses can manifest as directional fixation, an unbreakable drive toward a single location. One morning, Erica left a trail of soft blankets, food, and water behind him. He ignored all of it, but later that night her camera caught him stopping just once to sniff one of the blankets. A small moment, but significant. Perhaps the layers of instinct were beginning to peel back. She drove the route again the next day. The gravel road, the cabin, the silence. Only this time there were paw prints going beyond the porch. To the side of the house near a rusted generator, she found something new. A broken collar, buried under leaves. It was heavy-duty, military style, with frayed leather and a metal ring that had been warped by some kind of impact. When she picked it up, her hands trembled. A small tag still clung to the ring. The name etched into it was faint, but there. Shadow. She whispered the name aloud. In that instant, something inside her clicked. Shadow wasn't just wandering, he was returning, trying to piece together a world that had once made sense to him, and someone, perhaps long gone, had meant enough to embed that memory in every fiber of his being. She knew now. This was no ordinary journey. This was a homecoming, and the story was far from over. The forest was still that morning. A soft fog clung to the pine trees, muting the sharpness of the early light. Justin had just stepped outside his cabin, a chipped enamel mug of black coffee warming his hands, when he saw the figure. At first, he thought it was just another stray, a dark shape at the tree line, watching. He narrowed his eyes. Then the shape moved, slowly, wearily, and stepped into view. The German shepherd stood at the edge of the clearing, caked in dried mud, ribs showing, one leg favoring the other. But the eyes, that deep amber, met Justin's with something else. Entirely. Recognition. The mug slipped from Justin's hand and shattered on the steps. "Shadow," he whispered. The dog didn't bark. He didn't run. He just limped forward, step by deliberate step, until the space between them dissolved. Justin dropped to his knees, arms open but still unsure. He hadn't seen the dog in nearly a year. He had assumed the worst, and yet here he was. Shadow stopped just short of him, then closed the distance, lowering his head into Justin's chest with a sigh so human it broke something open in him. Justin wrapped his arms around the dog's body, feeling every scar, every shiver. "You found me," he said, voice cracking. "You really found me." Inside the cabin, the old routine returned without words. Justin poured warm water into a basin, dug out the first aid kit, and gently cleaned the dog's wounds. A gash on the paw, a cracked pad, signs of exhaustion. Shadow didn't flinch. He just watched Justin's hands, eyes half-lidded. Still. "Hate antiseptic, huh?" Justin murmured. He remembered the first time they met. It was overseas, Afghanistan, 2017. Justin was a Navy combat medic stationed in Kandahar. He had found the dog collapsed beside a Humvee wreck, shrapnel in his leg, eyes wild with panic. He wasn't even supposed to intervene. Military dogs had handlers, protocols, but something about the animal's quiet suffering cut through the noise. He carried the dog back to camp himself, under gunfire, half praying, half bleeding. It took weeks of quiet care, boiled chicken, soft commands, sleeping near him on the floor, and eventually the dog stopped shaking. They never gave the dog a name. Justin started calling him Shadow. He never knew if it was official, but it stuck. Now, in the safety of the mountain cabin, Shadow lay curled on an old wool blanket by the fire. Justin sat across from him, staring into the flames, the weight of memory pressing hard against the walls. "Where did you go?" he asked softly. Shadow blinked slowly. That night neither of them slept much, but neither seemed to mind. They had been apart for 317 days. Erica's journal confirmed it, and now they were both quiet, but not broken. According to the U.S. Department of Defense, nearly 1,600 military working dogs serve at any given time. Of those, roughly 10% become separated from their handlers due to combat incidents, injury, or bureaucratic mishandling. While most are eventually recovered, some simply vanish from the system, lost between spreadsheets and battlefields. Justin had filed paperwork, searched records, called every shelter in the Tri-County area when he returned stateside. But the trail had gone cold, until now. The following days became a rhythm of healing. Justin cooked rice and broth. Shadow slept for hours, then followed him silently through the woods. They didn't need much to feel whole. On the fourth morning, Shadow stood at attention before the front door. Not rigid, but familiar. As if waiting for a command. Justin tried something, half joking. "Down," he said. The dog obeyed instantly. Justin smiled. "Stay." And he did. Evening brought a quiet peace to the cabin. Justin found himself talking more, not loudly, not expecting answers, but he told Shadow about his nightmares, about the guilt, the men he couldn't save, the quiet panic that crept in when the world got too still. Shadow would inch closer, lay his head on Justin's boot, and stay. Research shows that veterans who are paired with a service dog experience a reduction in PTSD symptoms by over 60%, with improvements in sleep, socialization, and emotional regulation. Canine-assisted therapy is increasingly recognized by the VA and has become a pivotal part of treatment in over 30 military hospitals nationwide. But this wasn't about therapy. It was about family. Justin looked at the photo still pinned to the fridge, a black and white print from base camp years ago. Him in uniform crouching beside Shadow, who was wearing his first harness. Neither was smiling, but both were alive. Now they were again. On the 7th day, a sound in the distance startled Shadow. He leapt to the window, ears sharp. Justin stood beside him and saw nothing but trees, yet the unease lingered. He crouched beside Shadow, running, a hand over his side. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe, I got you." But something deep inside him whispered otherwise. They had found each other again. But the world they had both escaped from? It might not be done with them yet. The morning mist was just beginning to lift when Justin noticed it. A faint engraving on the back of Shadow's old collar, partially hidden under layers of dried mud and age. He had removed the collar the day Shadow returned, placing it in the drawer of his workbench. But something had nagged at him. A flicker of memory, a shape he couldn't quite name. Now, with the collar in his hand and the light hitting just right, he saw it clearly. A small triangle, intersected by 2 diagonal lines. Clean, symmetrical, and clearly deliberate. It wasn't a brand mark. It was something else. He stared at it for several minutes before stepping outside. The woods were still, quiet. Shadow, now stronger, followed close behind. They reached the tree line, the edge of the clearing that surrounded the cabin, and that's when he saw it, carved into the bark of a spruce tree near the property's edge. The same symbol. Weather-worn, but unmistakable. Justin's stomach turned. Memories returned in shards. 6 months earlier, before Shadow reappeared, a man had visited the cabin. Late afternoon, plain clothes, not local. He had introduced himself only as Martin, said he was doing research on canine behavior and had heard that Justin had experience with working dogs. He'd asked strange questions about memory retention, directional tracking, even dream recall in animals. At first, Justin brushed it off, but the man's last question stayed with him. "Do you think a dog can remember things it wasn't trained to remember?" Now the question felt loaded, measured, almost like a warning. Justin returned to the cabin and opened his laptop for the first time in weeks. Using a weak hotspot signal, he typed in combinations: triangle symbol, military dog programs, experimental training. Most searches turned up nothing. But on a forum buried behind dead links and expired credentials, he found something. An archived post from an ex-trainer. It referenced Project Helix, dogs trained not only for combat and tracking, but for advanced retention, memories embedded through repetition, trauma, and chemical reinforcement. The program had been suspended after allegations of animal abuse. Dogs reportedly exhibited symptoms of severe dissociation, hallucinations, and erratic behavior under stress. A redacted PDF mentioned that only 12 dogs were believed to have gone through the final phase of training. Of those, only 2 were unaccounted for. Justin felt bile rise in his throat. He typed the name into another search engine. Project Helix Dog Survivor. Nothing. He called Erica, told her everything. There was a long pause on the other end. Then she said, "I've heard rumors. In vet circles, a few shelters have taken in dogs that don't respond normally, hyper-intelligent, extremely quiet. Some can open doors, recognize photos. One even mimicked a staff member's morning routine. But they all had one thing in common. They were scared of silence, as if it reminded them of something worse." She sent him a folder of case reports. Names were redacted, but symptoms repeated. Excessive pacing between 2 and 5 a.m. Reaction to sounds not present in the environment. Aggression only when restrained. Attempts to dig in corners of metal kennels. Justin read the last line of one report. Aloud. Subject may exhibit signs of location imprinting. Will attempt to return to coordinates repeatedly, despite fatigue or injury. Coordinates north, gravel road. Shadow hadn't been wandering. He had been following a command he couldn't disobey. That night, Justin heard it. A vehicle. It wasn't close, but it didn't belong to anyone nearby. A low hum, headlights off. He peeked through the blinds. A black SUV sat just at the edge of the forest road. No movement, no sound. When he turned around, Shadow was already standing in front of the door. Justin packed within an hour. A small backpack, food, medical kit, Shadow's harness. By dawn, they were gone. According to the ASPCA, fewer than 10% of canines subjected to extreme stress environments are successfully rehabilitated without ongoing care. Moreover, data from independent watchdog organizations suggest that at least 5 private contractors have operated beyond military oversight in animal training over the past 15 years. Many of those organizations were shut down quietly. Justin didn't know where they were headed, only that they couldn't stay. He texted Erica one line before destroying the SIM card. He's not safe, neither am I. Will contact when I can. They walked through the forest for miles before finding a logging road. Justin kept his hood up. Shadow moved ahead, occasionally looking back. Every now and then the dog would stop, nose in the air as if checking for danger. Then they'd move again. They stayed at a roadside motel the second night. Justin paid in cash. Shadow didn't bark once. Inside the room, Justin stared at the blank TV screen, its black reflection showing him a man he barely recognized. But next to him, Shadow slept, peaceful, as if knowing the worst had passed. Before sleep claimed him, Justin pulled the collar from his pack, turned it in his hand, stared at the triangle. He whispered, "Whatever they did to you, they didn't break you." Outside, a black SUV passed slowly, then kept driving. The room smelled of pine wood and old linen. The walls were thin, the heater buzzed with inconsistent warmth, and the bed creaked every time Justin shifted his weight. But it was quiet. It was still. And it was the safest they'd felt in weeks. The roadside inn sat just outside a forgotten town off Highway 12, the kind of place where nobody asked questions if you paid in cash. Justin kept the lights low, curtains drawn. Shadow lay curled at the foot of the bed, breathing steady, eyes occasionally fluttering as if chasing something in a dream. Justin watched him from across the room. In those quiet moments, he felt the heavy contrast of everything they'd been through, the gunmetal weight of memory, and the fragile peace of now. His hand reached for the duffel bag where Shadow's collar sat, still carrying that cryptic symbol. It was a reminder. Whatever had made Shadow what he wasn't finished. Late that night, the sound of gravel crunching outside drew Justin to the window. A black SUV had pulled into the parking lot. It didn't park. It didn't turn off its engine. It just sat there. For several minutes, nothing moved. Nothing. Justin stood perfectly still, barely breathing. The SUV's windows were tinted. Then, as silently as it had arrived, it reversed out of the lot and disappeared into the trees. A warning, or a test. He closed the curtain slowly. When he turned, Shadow was already sitting up, alert, watching him. Justin knelt beside him, ran a hand through his fur. "We're not done yet, boy." They left the next morning. Justin paid in cash again, asked for no receipt. The motel clerk didn't even look up, just slid the keys off the counter and nodded. They drove east, away from the familiar routes. Justin didn't have a map, just a vague destination, somewhere no one knew either of their names, somewhere the black SUV wouldn't find them so easily. Every eye. Few miles, Shadow would perk up, look out the window, then rest his head again. There was trust there now. Not obedience. Not training. Trust. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, they pulled over near a creek. Justin let the engine idle. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. According to the VA, trust between handler and dog takes an average of 92 hours of direct interaction in low-stress environments. But for these two, it had only taken one shared silence in a pine wood cabin. He looked down at Shadow, who looked back, ears twitching at the sound of distant birds. "We keep going," Justin said, "until we're not being hunted anymore. Or until we find the others." He didn't know who the others were yet, but he had a feeling. Shadow wasn't the only one. The road ahead was cracked and faded, weaving into the unknown. But they were ready. Two figures, man and dog, alone. But no longer lost. Their journey was only beginning.